I always love doing these videos and revisiting previous episodes and stories of shows and discovering that my opinion changes rapidly upon a rewatch. For instance, when I first watched The Aztecs for the first time a few years ago, I thought it was alright. Nothing spectacular or exhilarating, just fine. I didn't mind it and quickly moved on to the next story. But the interesting thing that I noticed this time, looking at it with a critical eye, is just how tightly and well paced everything is. Seriously, this might be a contender for my favourite serial of season 1. The story, the dialogue, the set design, the costume design, the characters, everything just seems perfect. It's probably aided by returning writer John Lucarotti, who also wrote the previous historical story Marco Polo. With that story, he had 7 episodes to fill. However, The Aztecs is neatly packed as a 4-episode story, which is a format we'll slowly get very used to as the show goes on. But aside from An Unearthly Child, this is the only 4-episode story of season 1. The story begins with the TARDIS crew landing inside of an Aztec tomb circa 15th century. Here they lean heavily into the educational aspect right off the bat, with Barbara lecturing Susan on some of the Aztec traditions, placing a bracelet on her arm as she does so. They find a door leading outside, and as Barbara heads out, she's met by an Aztec man who starts hostile, however soon notices the bracelet on Barbara's wrist. Back with Ian and the Doctor, they finally leave the TARDIS, stepping out of the tomb which locks behind them, to be greeted by the same man who we saw with Barbara named Otlok. He's the High Priest of Knowledge in this particular Aztec civilization, and he tells them that Yetaxa has requested their presence. They also meet Tlatoxel, who has the apt title of High Priest of Sacrifice. I wonder who the bad guy is! Anyway, Yetaxa is actually Barbara, who took the bracelet from the tomb, and the Aztecs have taken this as the sign that she is a god reincarnated from the body of the former High Priest.
The Aztecs always showed the utmost courtesy towards their intended victims.
There's something so great about that line delivery. Yet, the others are not really trusted by the Aztecs at first until Barbara gives them free rein to be her eyes and ears across the city. Tlatoxel puts Ian in charge of the Aztec army, which doesn't please Ixta, who was originally supposed to be the leader. The Doctor is led to the Garden of Peace, where elderly people live out their days, almost like a retirement home of sorts. Here he meets Kameka, a sort of unusual love interest for the Doctor. Yeah, you heard that right. This is definitely something that Classic Who doesn't do often, more on the instructions of the BBC themselves, but since it's the first season, I guess this rule wasn't exactly in place yet, so love interest it is. She used to be married to the guy who designed the tomb until he died, so their son will have to help them get into the tomb. Ian, bro, you can't just rock up like that with no warning. Holy shit. He tells the Doctor that he's going to have to help perform the next sacrifice in order to show that he's really one of Yetaxa's servants. Of course, the Doctor wants him to do it so that they don't mess around with history. However, Barbara doesn't want to. The Doctor and her have quite the disagreement over this, yet Barbara does stop the sacrifice, and so the sacrificee in question, it jumps off the roof. I guess he really wanted to die. This is then followed by rain, which makes Tlatoxel happy that the sacrifice worked, but Barbara doesn't shift from her position on the matter. This leads to a fantastic scene between the Doctor and Barbara, where he really has a go at her for this.
Human sacrifice is their tradition. Their religion! There's nothing we can do about it.
I had to try.
But yet later consoles her as she still doesn't have as much experience travelling as the Doctor does to properly understand these things. The 4 characters all then branch off into their own storylines here, with Ian preparing to battle Ixta for full control of the Aztec army, with Ian using his thumb on a pressure point to show that he is supreme. Tlatoxel decides he's going to fuck with Ian to get him killed. The Doctor flirts with Kameka as she prepares to have him meet her son, which is actually Ixta. Ixta figures out that he can now infiltrate the crew secretly, as the Doctor doesn't know who Ixta is, and can use this to his advantage in his battle with Ian. Tlatoxel taunts Barbara by saying he knows she's a false goddess, and he's going to prove it. He confines her to the tomb entrance until Otlok can come and use his wisdom to evaluate the situation. She also learns about Ian's upcoming battle, which puts her in a bit of a worry. Susan, meanwhile, studies Aztec culture. Because education or something. Anyway, that's where Otlok is at the moment too, in case you were wondering. She challenges the views on arranged marriages, which kind of confuses Otlok. Ixta meets the Doctor and convinces him to help win an upcoming battle in exchange for some drawings his father made of the tomb. The Doctor agrees and extracts some poison from a nearby plant to help Ixta win the battle, completely unaware that this battle is against Ian. Otlok speaks with Barbara, who remains adamant that sacrifices should be banned, and also that Ian and Ixta's battle should not be to the death. Otlock needs some time to think this information over as the Doctor finds out that he's just fucked over Ian from Barbara. Sure enough, Ian begins to lose as Barbara shows up to break the fight before Ian is killed. Tlatoxel tells her to stop the fight herself to show that she truly is a god. She does so by threatening to kill Tlatoxel unless Ixta relents. The Doctor and Tlatoxel have a little chat where the Doctor tries to convince Tlatoxel to help them into the tomb. Tlatoxel speaks to Ixta, who admits that there never were any plans or drawings of the tomb and just used it as leverage. Ian overhears Tlatoxel's new plan of poisoning Barbara and that if she lives, then she truly is a god. Ian warns Barbara, telling her that most of the Aztec community believe Tlatoxel and that the only exception is Otlock, who seems incredibly chill in comparison to every other character in the story. Tlatoxel shows up with the poisoned drink and Barbara tries to get him to drink it first, which gives up the game. She actually admits to him that she's not really a god, but that she'll set the whole Aztec army on him if he tells anyone. Okay, I don't know why she'd do that, but it seems to work for now. The Doctor accidentally gets married to Kameka, as you do. The twisted thing is that he has to go along with it. He makes her believe in this life they'll have together in order to get what he needs to get the hell out of there. Susan is set up to marry the next sacrifice by Tlatoxel, who is aware of her views on arranged marriage to show the rest of the Aztecs that she doesn't share the same views as they do. She obviously declines, so a punishment is set to take place. They don't tell Barbara who it is that's being punished, so she agrees to this. The Doctor and Ian begin to theorise that there may be a secret entrance into the tomb while they share a moment over the Doctor's new marriage.
Yo, what?
Yes, I made some cocoa and got engaged. Oh, don't giggle, my boy. It's neither here nor there.
Barbara soon discovers that Susan is to be punished, as well as the sacrifice still to take place. However, Otlock even becomes suspicious when she tries to stop both, effectively saving the pain of one girl whilst dooming the whole civilization to the wrath of the gods. Except she can't tell them that there's no gods to sacrifice to without blowing her own cover. That night, Ian sneaks out to meet with the Doctor, but not very well as Ixta follows. The Doctor has searched the entire tomb to find a secret panel that Ian manages to move. He heads in as Ixta shows up, closing the panel as it leads to a water dam which will flood the garden, so Ian gets trapped while the water begins to run through the tunnel in a fantastic cliffhanger to the third episode. Of course, he escapes and finds his way back to the tomb where the TARDIS still lies. He props the door open with a rope for them to escape through, and now all they have to do is get Susan and they can get the fuck out of there. Ixta and Tlatoxel believe Ian to be dead and celebrate together while Susan is guarded in preparation for her punishment. Ian rescues Susan, fucking decimating Ixta in about 2 seconds. Tlatoxel panics and decides to frame Ian for attacking Otlock using his club. The rope he used to prop open the door snaps, so Ian has to go back through the tunnel again, discovering Otlock and his club in the garden, aware he's being set up. However, it's no use as he's taken prisoner for his crimes, and this causes Otlock to believe that Barbara is now a false goddess, completely damning the crew unless they can escape. While the Doctor tries to regain access to the tomb, Barbara convinces Otlock that Ian wasn't the one who attacked him, but it's too late to change Ian's situation. He manages to free Susan though, and resigns as High Priest of Knowledge, passing the title to Kameka as he leaves the civilization forever. The Doctor and Barbara manage to get the tomb door open as Tlatoxel discovers that Otlock is left. While Kameka gets Susan out, Ian escapes with them, knocking out was this the 100th person this season? He wears a disguise so as to not alert anyone to his escape. Susan and the Doctor finally reunite as the Doctor bids farewell to Kameka, who actually sees this coming, giving him a seal as a parting gift. Tlatoxel discovers Ian and Susan's escape, anxious to not let them ruin the sacrifice. They have a face-off in front of the tomb, where Ian and Ixta finally have their fight to the death, ending with Ixta's death. The crew finally escape back into the tomb as Tlatoxel completes the sacrifice. Barbara feels depressed about not being able to do anything to stop the pointless deaths. However, the Doctor points out that she did affect Otlock significantly, showing him the reality of where the civilization is heading for, bringing clarity to one man as doom looms over the Aztec civilization. Oh, nice callback, you see that from earlier? Full circle right there. Anyway, they head out onto their next adventure as the TARDIS lands, yet still seems to be moving somehow. Barbara points out that they could have potentially landed within something as the serial draws to a close. One of the main themes this story brings up is to do with time travel and the repercussions of changing the past to suit your own untimely beliefs. Things will go on and work their own way out, which is showcased by Tlatoxel not being punished for his wrongdoings at all. Effectively, he wins. Yeah, that doesn't happen often in Doctor Who, but it reinforces that point. It also brings up the interesting paradox of, if the crew are there now, haven't they always been there? Like, this technically already happened by the time the show actually starts in 1963. So were they not always there at that time in history? Or did they just show up then to change the timeline? Because if you think about it, the show uses this as a device to show how we're still here. Through all these attempts at ending the world and so forth, the Doctor has always been there to stop it. Of course, in the first series of the revival show, the opposite is tackled as a death is prevented, which was always supposed to happen. So it comes back to that age-old trope. Time travel is fucking complicated. It's best not to think about it at all. The set design and costumes are truly spectacular for the time and budget constraints they were under, with the production team constantly worrying that they weren't going to be able to pull it off. But they did a great job, as did the post-production team with the soundtrack. It totally fits the vibe and doesn't come across as that goofy, but yeah, there is still a little bit of goof. Also, the cameras used to film this episode weren't able to zoom in, so this episode is full of dramatic close-ups on the actors' faces. In fact, this seems to happen all the time in this story, with each one getting marginally funnier to me throughout. And Jacqueline Hill, who played Barbara, cited this as her favourite story she ever did on the show, and I can totally see why. Like I touched upon earlier, it's incredibly well paced and doesn't overstay its welcome. It also benefits from actually existing, which John Le Carotti's two other stories don't have the pleasure of, with Marco Polo being the first, and Season 3's The Massacre being the last. The script is so tightly written, and Tlatoxel is a great villain, however much he might lean into some tired tropes to do so. Of course, it has its fair share of mistakes here and there, with the most notable being William Hartnell just not standing in the right place during one of the early scenes in the tomb, so much so that the camera has to actually shift position to fix the frame. I really enjoyed revisiting this one. Check this one out again if you forgot about it. The 4 episode length means it's not too much of a drag, and the pace is kept up pretty well throughout.